think this was the double jump that I was looking at. Oh no, wait. Do I not have the bird? Oh, I should have the bird. Okay, there it is. That's what it was. It was the bird. Phew. I wanted that bird animation. Actually, right here, this is cool. Look at how much they're anticipating here, and then it just holds. Now, keep in mind the frame rate here is 30 frames per second, not 24. Not that it's going to make a huge difference in terms of the frames, but something to keep in mind. So we get this big anticipation here. This is basically the characters jumping. You hit the button, they go straight into this. Now this is the first thing. I talk about this quite often when I talk about video games, but it's an important thing to keep in mind, is that when you're playing a video game, you don't need nearly as much anticipation as you normally would with other animations. So for example, right here, you can tell the moment I hit the button is right here, and look at the big pop that then just kind of goes into this smaller little turn right there. The reason you don't need that is that most of the anticipation is you as the player anticipating to hit the button. So when you hit the button, what you want is instant feedback, or close to instant feedback, versus a long animation of anticipating. The only or an exception to this is when you have a character building up to a move, but usually that's by holding down a button, which again is you as a player anticipating by holding the button. Now she goes to jump. Really nice reversal here. So you've got these nice lines right there. Reverses through before going into this nice straight. And we get this nice motion upwards and nice clean overlap. So just kind of overlapping through, straightens out, and comes down. Now here, the bird coming in. Look at that. In one frame, hits. So the bird, it looks like it's animated on 15s actually. Or not 15s. It's 30 frames per second, so it's animated on 2, so 15 frames for the most part. Look at that. Oh, the detail in there. Now, the big thing with shapes like this is it looks very complex, but you can break it down into much simpler forms. So, for example, it's just this kind of wave pattern that goes through, and if you kind of watch it, it's just extending this wave that stretches through and then kind of breaks open. So the simple form of it, even actually, let's simplify it even more. Ignore the breaking open. It's just this form that kind of comes through and then evolves into the bird. So you're taking kind of a wave and just changing its form. The other elements of it are just kind of secondary. So like this form here it's all kind of, it adds on and layers on, but the main motion is actually not that tricky. I say that it's not that tricky. Oh, so simple. No, it's very complex. But if you start breaking it down into the simpler forms, what you get is these simple concepts that you can work off of. It's the same as a really complex body mechanic shot with a lot of acting and stuff. When you look at it, it's like there's so much stuff. But if you break it down into the hips, they do this kind of bouncing motion. The chest, it's got its own kind of overlap to it. You've got the face and the cheeks and all of these and how they work together. You get motion that is extremely complex when put together, but simple in its individual parts. So if you're able to kind of break that down in animation, it makes things a whole lot easier to work with. So for example, let's say you have this part here. if you watch that, it's being pulled off the ground. It's kind of being pulled off the ground and then brought back into the form of the character. Well, the spacing of it, let's kind of just focus on this. It pops up in here and then just eases in. And it's squash and stretch. So if you kind of look here, it's just following that arc. So it's got this line here. Gets pulled through. It's a continuation of this line here. And gets pulled in. Right there. That's it. Simple. But you put it together with everything else, complex. I personally appreciate the spike that breaks the wave and forms the beak. Yeah, like right here. You actually see it form earlier, right there. So again, in terms of simplicity, instead of trying to think of all of this all at the same time, they've got that spike. It comes through in the center here. Shoots through. The spacing eases out a little bit. It's still technically easing, but it's still stretching as well, so you're getting thinner and thinner right there. Easing in. And then starting to form, and you get the whole head coming from that. And now as the beak stops, the rest of the mass, so this is starting to think of more of the, I guess you could say, squash and stretch of it. This whole line has been stretched and moving. The tip is slowing down, but the rest is trying to keep going. So it's gonna like push against. And it creates this overlap here of the head. That form of the line is pushing against the tip. And they're using that to create the form of the bird. It's overlap. But it works so well. So that is a brilliant use of... I hate using the word simplicity, but that's basically what it is thinking of these simple forms and simple things, putting them all together, and it just creates this gorgeous effect. Now, the other thing here is just look at the weight. So it comes up and hits. You get these two big stomps in there. And it's a bird. It's a little light bird. It's a tiny bird. Like, if you were to see this normally, it's like, oh, it's a little bird, until you notice the character underneath here. And oh my god, no, it's a huge bird. How do they make it feel heavy? Even if, imagine we didn't see the character, we would still feel that this is a heavy bird. Well, it's really just all in the spacing. So, you also have a camera shake, that helps a lot. But it's the spacing. If you look at it and imagine kind of a bouncing ball, it comes up. And we'll look at the other the other step as well. It'll be easier because it's not forming as well. But if you kind of look at the spacing here, it holds very high, very much. It's just kind of staying up in the air. Then as it starts coming down, it's the hips that are leading. This portion of the bird is starting to come down. It starts to create that pushing motion. The chest is kind of coming through as well. So as the hips come down, it's pushing this forward as well. But the head is still coming up here. And we get a little bit of anticipation with the leg. It's coming up slightly. Then, right after that, hips keep pushing down. Leg starts to come down. Everything is coming down now. Except for the tail, which is overlapping upwards, which is nice. It gives some contrasting motion. And then, in one frame, look at the spacing. We go from up here to down here to way down there. Look at that spacing. And then it hits. It just slams into it. The foot comes down. Slam. But then what also helps is if you look at the body kind of bounces. It goes down, eases a little bit, and then starts going up right away. Not by much, but a little bit. So it eases back out here. It eases out slower than it goes down. So that makes it feel heavier coming down than it is going up. But what really makes it heavy is that the head takes so much longer to overlap. So we get down, head's coming down, body's coming down. Now, both things keep going down. Head goes down, body goes down. Frame after, body's starting to come up, head's still going down. That creates that nice overlap. Now here, going up, the head is now going up as well, but the beak is now going down. So you feel that weight shifting right through the entirety of the bird. It's not just going tuk tuk tuk, you're getting it shaken there. All the way through. And look how long the beak takes before it goes back up. Right here. This is when the beak starts to go up again. That adds that big, heavy anticipation before the next hit. And then once again, you get that anticipation. It comes up, really holds it, even freezes. Like right here, it's holding for one pose, and then wham, just right down. And this is another really cool thing that they're doing here, is that they take this really extreme motion downwards. Down. Everything's coming down. As the hips stop and kind of hit the ground, what they then do is they transition this motion downwards into a forwards motion. They're using that momentum to jut the head forward of the bird. So instead of feeling that like a head just pops forward, like it's just sitting on a tuk, it just creates a pigeon effect. Instead, by dropping it down first, you get that weight, and then the momentum of that lunges the bird forward, and it makes it so much scarier in terms of its motion. And then they stretch it out, get this nice line of action all the way through. Again, simple shapes, simple forms here. And then nice twist right there. Very bird-like, very sharp. So good. Let's see. I think this. Which clip is it here? Okay, so let's take a look at this one. What was it that I was saving on this one? Well, let's take a look at this cape flutter here. That's so pretty. Character comes down. And look at this nice turn. So you've got this nice form here. And as she turns, they lead with the form. So as she's turning, we feel her head, which is there, starting to turn. And the form around her is trying to kind of go back to where it was before here. And we have this feeling of the head leading the action through as the rest of her kind of pulls back and goes around. It adds this really nice kind of flow in there. It hits here and this. Oh, look at that. Squash and stretch. This is the squash pose. Very short. Squashed, and then she stretches and it gets nice and thin. It's principles of animation. Get a little water there. So it's all principles of animation. It's lead and follow. Right through here, same thing. She's pulling through, and right here, her head stops moving. But the cloak is going to want to keep moving, so it billows out this way as her body stops. And it just keeps going. It's overlap. And this is the thing that makes this game so beautiful, is that they master overlap so well. So here she drops down, sudden drop, and the cape wants to drag back to where it was before, right through here. So it's pulling down in the center there. And you'll notice as we're going through this, there are moments that it pops a lot. And like right here. Or where was it? Right there. This is a big pop in form. Is that bad? Not at all. Big pops like that, it's amazing how much of a pop you can get without making it feel like a pop. And it's one of the tricky things that we as animators have to learn, is that when we're framing through something, there will be things that feel like pops and look like pops. But the important thing is that, what does it feel like when we are playing the animation? Oftentimes, like if I was to play through this, it doesn't feel like a pop at all. It feels really good. You don't see that pop. It feels sharp, but not a pop. And then you frame through, and this is the problem with analysis in animation. Not analysis, but like when you're looking at your own animation. So you're going in Maya and going, okay, let's look at this, frame through, frame through. Oh wait, I think I see a pop here. Okay, let's fix it. And you start doing all of this fixing. When you frame through, things will look like pops, like that, right there, pop. Oh, okay, let's reform that. You have to make sure it looks good when you play it first. Double check that the pops are actually there when you play the animation at full speed, because what you might be doing is in fact not cleaning out pops, but basically killing any visual interest in your animation by making everything so soft and boring. So play blast your shot, double check your spacing on things. It's very important that you don't remove the visual interest of your shot by accident. So let's see, is this the bird? Yeah, there we go. There's the bird. Okay, so that's the same form as before. Okay. I think this one is the full one. Yeah, I think this was when the bird first came in. Okay, let's take a look at this. Nice arcs right through there. That's so cool. Like, it just comes through. Now, game engine wise, basically what they're doing here is you don't want to have to animate like a bunch of birds here all flying and like try to do that by hand. I'm assuming this is probably procedurally generated. You've basically got an emitter here that's flying through the scene, emitting birds, or causing birds to follow, and it just kind of moves in this arc and creates this random cloud of birds. Now, from there, as it goes through, all they need to do is kind of stop the emitter here and let the drawing that's over top, the black, kind of fill up and just slowly turn off the emitter. You can actually see it happening here. all the birds are just kind of disappearing into this one spot. So it's just the emitter kind of turning off, stopping and not emitting anymore. And you just overlay it, and it creates this amazing effect without having to animate all of these individual birds. So it comes through. You get this really cool. This is basically the anticipation here. So this is the anticipation of the bird. It's coming in. You're creating this sphere, and then you get this big explosion outwards. Look at that spacing. Once again, this is where, if you're analyzing animation, and analyzing in the sense of framing through, looking at your spacing, it could be easy to go, okay, here's our spacing, and then whoosh, we get that. And then ease in here. Look at that spacing. That definitely looks like a pop, doesn't it? Right there. From here to here. That's a big spacing change between this and then this. So our spacing chart here would be something like that. That's huge. And then if you add before that there, we get something like that. That's a big spacing pop, but it's not a pop. When you look at it at speed, look at how it feels. Definitely not a pop. Nowhere near a pop. So, especially for anyone here who is starting their animation journey, who's starting to learn animation, be very careful what you consider a pop. We're kind of taught that a pop is a large gap in spacing. And that is technically true. But not all large gaps in spacing are a pop, if that makes sense. We want to make sure that when we see a pop, it's not just making things more even. Sometimes it's just exaggerating things. And I talked about this in the last stream, where if you have, for example, let's say, I'm just going to do a simple thing here. You have a sphere that's easing out, goes a little faster here, and then goes forward, pops forward there, and then eases in. That's kind of what we're getting here. Well, this, when you hit play, might feel like a pop. Okay, how do we fix that? Well, the easy thing to do is try to either add more frames or even out the spacing. That would fix the pop, if we're feeling a pop. However, a better way to fix it, there's no like specific way, but a better way without having to make things feel more even and more slow, we want to keep the speed, we want to keep that snappiness in the animation, is we just need to connect the audience's eye from one pose to the next. This is where smear frames come in, or lines, or blur. So instead, I would just want to start exaggerating. For example, maybe this starts to stretch out a little bit more here. This sphere really stretches out, and we get that. We've got the same amount of frames. Our sphere is still going all the way over here. We're just stretching it back a little bit to connect the two drawings, here and here. And I say drawings, but it could be in CG as well. The two frames, we're connecting them together visually. And this could be, again, speed lines, so you could have like something like that, and it connects the thing. Or you could have multiples, where on one frame you just have multiple spheres showing at the same time. You're connecting the eye of the audience. Now with the bird here, the way they do that is just with the wing. Like, you've got all of this wing here. When you have this big pop, look at that. It's still connected right here. And right around there. So you have this big pop, but we don't feel like it's we're losing track of things because our eye is being led through this whole thing. Now, another thing that tends to make things feel like a pop is if things stop too soon, but that's kind of a whole other thing. That usually leads to either overshooting or overlapping action a little bit more, or easing in a little bit more clearly. I think follow-through is the most important thing to remember. I think a pop has unsuccessful follow-through in making it feel like a large release of energy. They also make sure not to challenge the background shape too much, so your eye follows the form nicely. Exactly. So this is going into the other thing I was talking about. So you have the pop, which tends to feel like, or that's when your spacing is too big. Then you have another element, which some people call a pop. I tend to call hitting a wall, which is when you have this big motion that then just freezes, just stops. It just loses all of its energy for no reason. This is another form of pop. It's the lack of momentum. It's the lack of continuation of energy. To solve that, this is where follow through comes in. Overlap, overshoot. All of these things come in to help push our ability to settle in properly and make this connected feeling to the animation. So for example, if I was animating this sphere here and then it just stopped right here, done, that's it, I would have this very fast motion. It just goes through and then freezes, doesn't move. That would feel, this is very epic music for a ball spacing, a sphere spacing issue. So it goes in and just stops, freezes. That would not feel right. It could feel very cartoony, yes, but if I wanted this to feel heavy, like this bird here, that's gonna kill that motion. So I would either want to overshoot the motion, so it comes back there and then maybe circles back around, something like that, so we get that feeling of overshooting and coming back, or easing in. All of those help. So in the case of the bird here, we get the big pop, but then look at how it just keeps going and easing in, and they have this awesome ease that helps to create this really nice effect. Now, this is another thing that it's hard to show in 3D, but it is a very important concept, and it's very easy to see in 2D, which is when you're stopping something. And we talk a lot about curves in animation. We talk about C's, straights, S's, reverse C's. There's all of these shapes that we tend to create in lines. So you want your character to be in a C shape sometimes, where the character is bent over. You want them to be a straight, to be stronger. Those are all very good. But what a lot of people don't realize, and this is something that took me forever to learn when I was an animation student, is that curves have weight to them. And I've talked about this in previous streams before, but it's very much worth mentioning because it is one of the things that I still see a lot of people have problems with, is that within one curve, you can make all sorts of curves and you can make animation within that. So for example, you take a C shape. That's kind of, or just a typical arc. That's kind of a C shape. So we do an arc. Whoop. There we go. Okay, let's make another arc a little bit smaller. Okay, another arc. Okay. What I'm doing is I am creating arcs, but the weight of the arc is the same. Now, what is the weight of the arc? The weight of the arc is where the arc is favoring. So if you basically look at the ends of the arc and then the peak, the very peak of the arc, you'll notice that it's right in the center. Here, well, it's a little bit more to the right, but still in the center. Here, still in the center. it's very much in the center every time. This is what lots of people tend to do by default. They put the weight of the arc in the center, which makes these very nice clean arcs, but it gets very boring very quickly. You could have an arc that's like this. If you look at the peak, it's over here. That's very much weighted one way more than the other. And what you can do is you can play with 2 points that are the same, so here and here, keep that relationship the same, but by playing with the weight of the arc, you can change the entire feeling of it. So the points stay the same, but the arc changes. And this is what they're doing with the wing here. If you look at the wing, as it comes up, look at the arcs that it's creating. It starts off with this very centered peak right here. But by the end, we get this straight line that just curves a little bit at the end and then evolves into almost a straight. Well, actually, it is a straight right here. Very close to a straight. So they're using that concept to make the wing open up and flare out in this beautiful way. But for the majority of it, it's staying in the same arc. It doesn't need a reversal. It doesn't need to change direction or turn into an S shape or anything like that. It's just slowly straightening, but not in a boring way. So it's a very important concept to keep in mind, and it applies to anything. You can apply that to your character's spine. You can apply that to the entire line of action in a character. It can really make your animations much more dynamic. Now here again we get this big, what we would normally consider a pop if I was looking at this like, oh, just framing through. Yeah, that's definitely a pop. Look at how big the spacing is. Yeah, but you look at it at speed. Again, the important thing, always look at your animation at speed. Definitely doesn't feel like a pop. It just feels so powerful. And okay, so the program I'm using is Keyframe MP Pro. I don't think my notes are working, but there's a command for it. It is player, I think. Yeah. So that's the program I'm using right there. If you want to check it out, there is a free version which is very, very good. It doesn't allow for annotations, but it is still a great program. If you want the annotations, I would check out the Pro version, which is about $70, but well worth the investment. Sorry, the light beam of the video, it's like there's a small beam of light on my background as well that kind of goes right around there too. It's like, oh, kind of lines up nicely. It's almost like the video or the it's lighting up my scene a little bit. I was just turning the lighting a little bit more red. Let's see. Do you get a delay when you draw on Keyframe MP Pro? I recently got it, but the drawing feels sluggish. There is a little bit of a delay, so it is not a drawing program. That's the big thing. So, for example, if I try to draw really quickly, you can see how those lines are very sharp and jagged, and sometimes, especially you can see when trying to draw a circle, it's sometimes not the cleanest. There is a delay. It's a slightly sluggish. The reason for that is it's caching a lot of the scene in and is just slowing things down. So, for example, I've got a 900 frame animation in here that it has to have cached so you can basically frame through and jump at any time and then just start playing through. So it is going to be a little slow. The bigger the file, the more it's going to feel slower. So for example, I could take in a whole movie on here, like a full 2-hour film, and start scrubbing through it. But then you start getting some really big delays. Why is it called weight? I'm not sure the exact reason, but it's basically where something feels heavier. So the general kind of the start of this, let me bring in an actual drawing program here. Chances are better is a hardware delay, and they're making a line from the current point to the last point. Let's open up my drawing program. I'm gonna have to change monitors here. Oh shoot. Actually, it might not work. We'll see if this works here. Because of the game I was playing, I have to draw on a different monitor, and I think we might run into an issue where I won't be able to use my tablet. Okay, I might have to use Krita for this. Okay. Yeah. Let me open up Krita first. So the weight of a line is basically where we feel that the line is heaviest. And Krita doesn't want to open. Come on, Krita. There we go. Are you gonna open? Yes, no? There we go. Yaha! It works! Okay. So, let's make a new template here. Okay. So, let's take a line here. So, let's say I want to draw, and let's pick a nice brush here. Now, why is it not drawing? Am I drawing with? Interesting. Oh wait, there we go. So, as you're drawing, let's find a brush this one should do. So there we go. So we can see how lines can start thin and thick, and end up thicker or get thinner. So we start getting something like that. This is line weight. Lines that are thin are less heavy than lines that are thick. It's basically the amount of ink that goes down. We've got more ink, it makes it feel heavier. Well, that line weight, that kind of same concept kind of comes into here, where if you have a curve, the part that feels heavier is the part that sinks down. So for example, imagine you've got 2 points here, and you take a sphere and you drop it, and between these 2 points you have a piece of cloth. Well, that means that the sphere will pull down on the cloth, and this is actually going to be straighter here. So you get something like that. The Sims. The Sims 3 had great music. So this is the weight of the line. It's where the weight is pulling down on the line the most. So this is where that kind of feeling comes from, is that most extreme point of a curve is where it feels like the most weight is being applied and the curve is kind of being stretched from the other points. Oh, sorry. Dang it. Aw, darn. Okay. I forgot. I'm not sharing my screen. I'm showing the program. Curse me! So let's see. We're gonna have to go back into my other setup here. So there we go. So let's do this here. And I'll go over that whole talk again because people can't see anything if I'm drawing on the wrong program. Okay. Yay. So let's do this again. So you have the first concept is line weight. So line weight is when you have a line that is, well, different sizes. So for example, if I'm drawing something like this, it starts thin, gets thicker, like that. And you can go thick and then thin again. And this is playing with line weight. Line weight is very important when you're doing illustration because it helps to show where the audience should focus on. So a general concept of line weight is that your outlines of a character are always going to be thicker than your inner lines. This helps the outlines to stand out and create this more visually dynamic flow in your pose. And if you play around with that line weight, you can make things that really just feel very visually interesting without any extra detail. So that's line weight. Now, curve weight is, like I was saying before, well, people can see. Let's see, where's my perfect pencil? There it is. Imagine I have 2 points right here. And then we take a sphere and we drop it. So it falls down here. Now, we've got that sphere falling, but hey, what if we put a canvas between these 2 points? A piece of cloth stretched between them. What's going to happen when the ball hits the canvas? Well, it's going to get stretched through. And it's going to support the canvas. Now, if we remove those, we get a curve. And this is the weight of the curve. You've got that whatever is pulling the curve or pushing the curve, that is creating the weight of it. It's the most extreme point. So you can adjust the weight of a curve by pushing how close that curve, the extreme of the curve is, to each point. So you can get something like that. That's the weight. Imagine there's a sphere here being pushed through. It's the center of mass in a sense. It's where the weight is pulling or pushing or affecting the curve. And with that also translates into our animation as well, because that's what allows us, for example, if we create a line of action, we can push the weight of the curve to make it feel like different forces are being applied to the body in different ways, which is very powerful. We don't want to just have, and this is where I fell in when I first started learning how to draw and learning how to animate, is all my curves would be this, always even with a bigger curve. It's always even, where the center of the curve is very close to the center of the 2 lines right here. So no matter what curve I do, it was always like this. And it took me a long time to get over that and to switch my brain from going, okay, I need to make a curve, and it's always ending up even. Even now I have to be careful when I'm drawing because it kind of is this tendency I go to. But instead you can really exaggerate this, and like this is a little exaggeration here, but you could go something like that even. Like, it's the same curve, but now we're just pushing it a little bit more. There's all sorts of ways you can push your curves so that weight is just a little different. Would ease in and out count as even? If they're exactly the same on both sides, kind of. So even lines are, so this is a spacing chart now. Let's go and do this on a new layer here. So let's say we have a spacing chart here. Even is when everything is even. You've got the same gap between all your keys. So that is even, that's linear. Now, when we put ease in and out, let's say we're going to keep this here, but now we're going to ease in and out a little bit, like this. That's a little bit more interesting, but it can still end up feeling even if it's the same on both sides, unless we really exaggerate it. So if I really exaggerate this, and actually let's, just for demo purposes, let's say we try to make this, like, what I'm going to do is that's half. We'll go half here, half here, half here. Half, half, half. That can still look very even. So let's push it. So we're going to just exaggerate the animation. So now we've just got more keys at the beginning, more keys at the end here. Break the targets. I love those mini games in Smash Brothers. I wish they would bring back Break the Targets. It was my favorite. So we could push the spacing to be more extreme, so that now we get a little bit more even out here. But the problem here is that it's technically not even, but this is, you could call it like a twinning of the spacing, you could call it a mirroring of the spacing. An evenness of the spacing is that the in and then the out are exactly the same. Sometimes we'll have to do that, but in general, it's better to try and adjust that so we don't have that evenness. So for example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines in there. Well, what if I took more frames to ease out? So 1, 2, 3, 4, and now instead of going into the center, we're going to go 5, 6, 7, like that. So we'll draw that middle frame the biggest here. So now that middle frame, the kind of big motion, is offset, and we're not copying the amount of frames in and out either. So now we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That will make your spacing less even. Now, there's a lot of ways to do that. There's like, you could have it to be where you have only one frame ease out, whoosh, very fast, and then all the rest over here. You can push your spacing however you want. Really, it's just a matter of trying to not just do ease in, ease out, ease in, ease out, as if they are mirrors of each other. Does all objects tend to ease out when they start their motion all the time? If it's natural motion, yes. Basically, the simple way to think about it is that when motion starts, if it's started on its own, so for example, if I'm sitting here and then I have to start moving, I'm going to ease out. Think of physics. An object at rest wants to stay at rest. An object in motion wants to stay in motion. Well, if an object at rest wants to stay at rest, in order to get it out of rest, we have to build up that energy. So it takes time to build up. An object in motion wants to stay in motion. Well, we want to stop it. Well, it has to take time to stop that energy. The exception to this is when you have a source that has more energy. So, for example, let's say you've got a character standing here and then someone suddenly punches them in the face. Suddenly, this object that's at rest is fighting an object that's in motion. And depending on which one hits harder, so for example, if the fist is super heavy, imagine a big, huge boxer just hits me in the face. That's a lot of energy being put into my face. So this object that wants to stay at rest is going to be beat by this object that wants to stay in motion. Suddenly your spacing goes from completely still to just one frame. Poof. That's a pop in your spacing, but a good pop. So you would have the object at rest, and instead of easing out, you would just go right in there and then probably ease into the snap on the side there. So you would just have that. But now, let's say we have the opposite. Someone's going to punch me, but they're super weak. Or vice versa. Maybe it's the big bad boss fight, and you've got the hero. He's about to punch the boss in the fight, or in the face, And he hits, and the face doesn't even flinch. You just get, and it stops. Now you have an object at rest that wants to stay at rest that is stronger than the punch, stronger than the object hitting it. So there might be a little motion in there, but instead the object in motion is just going to stop. It's not going to ease out. It's just going to freeze in place because it hit the face. Well, technically it won't freeze. It would probably bounce away a little bit. But that goes into a whole other set of things. So that's the way you can kind of start thinking about it. Is that kind of the physics of it a little bit more. It takes time for things to build up speed. So let's jump in here. So hopefully that makes sense. And then let's see. I think unfortunately I don't have too much time on this. I wanted to go over more animations. Which one should I go over? Let's go over this one because it's a nice close-up of the character. So got this nice overlap in the character. Look at that hair. Basically, it's very simple. So for anyone who's, especially if you're an animation mentor, you've done this before. The tailor assignment, as an object goes up, the ball goes up, the tail wants to drag behind. Same thing with the pendulum. You've got the ball of the head right here. As it goes up, the hair wants to drag down. As it starts to ease to a stop here, so the spacing of the head is easing in right there, the hair follows through and comes up. Then as it starts to come down, we get a larger overlap here. As the head suddenly stops, so you get that, and then stops right there, the hair starts to come down. Just overlap, nothing complex, but it adds so much. Now, for anyone who wants to animate hair, now this is a song from my youth. Cameron and I used to go on the slide levels of Super Mario 64 all the time, just for the fun of it. Such a hectic song. With the hair here, the big thing is that you don't want to try and animate the hair, and this would apply to the cloth as well, before animating the core underneath. So for something like this, all you'd have to do is animate the head without the hair, going up and down. Basically, it's a bouncing ball, a variant of the bouncing ball, going up and down, up and down, up and down, down, up and down. And then you just take that and then add the hair over top. And you get this nice motion very quickly, very easily. Anytime I see, very easily in animation, basically it means it takes a lot of time and a lot of practice, and you're going to probably redo it 2 or 3 times at least. But it's still easy. It's never easy, exactly. All we can do is make it less difficult. That's really what it is. And probably that would be a better term for it. So like animating the hair here is tricky because there's a lot of lines. You've got the bangs here. This is its own form. And this is one way of thinking about this. You've got the forms. You've got a secondary form here, and then a tertiary form there. The 3 different forms, all of them overlapping, and then having to interact with each other. It's cool that they even did the in-betweens here. That's really cool. Such a cool effect, that little black shadow there. But anyway, you've got these 3 forms of the hair that have to overlap. That's a tricky thing to animate. But instead of having to try and figure out how that should animate as the body's also moving, you just figure out how the head should move first. Then you figure out how the hair will move on top of that. This is making it less difficult. It doesn't make it easy, but it makes it less difficult. So cool. I love the, like, how her cloak is such a solid color, but then the legs, the hair, it's got this painterly effect. It's just so nice. And then just how everything has this beautiful simplicity in the lines. It definitely has a or it reminds me of Book of Kells, or what's the other one? The one with the seal. Book of Kells, and I can't remember the name. Song of the Sea, that's it. I had the word sea and nothing else. Song of the Sea. Those are both wonderful shows for simplicity and form. If anyone hasn't watched it yet, I definitely recommend them, especially if you're interested in composition and interested in learning how to simplify forms and getting clear interpretation of it. So let's see here. One thing I did want to look at, this is this one, this composition here was so good. That was this moment here. Like the rest of the game at the beginning was really cool. The moment that this came in, that sold me. Like, I don't know if I got the recording of the title coming up, but yeah, I didn't. Oh, dang it. But when the title came up and then came down, oh, so good. But what I want is the cube. There we go. It's such a cool effect. So you've got this billowing effect here. So I was talking about how do you animate billowing effects. So this is something Cameron is going to be hopefully talking about sometime in the future. He'll be able to do a whole demo of this. But how do you animate this kind of billowing effect in your shots? It's actually much easier than you would think. Basically, let's go back to my drawing tool here. And okay, so to do this, yeah, it's amazing what can be done with silhouettes. I totally agree. So let's say, oh, billowing. So as in billow, which is like a cloth billowing in the wind. It's being pushed by the wind. So billowing, I think that's how you spell it. So if you want to animate a cloth being blown in the wind or hair in the wind, what you do is just take, let's say, your line here and imagine that a sphere is moving through it. So we have a sphere moving here, and let's see, how do I want to animate this? I'm trying to animate this off of a separate monitor, so I'm not able to see all my tools here. Let's see. I'm just gonna have to switch my monitor. Give me 1 second. There we go. Hey, I can draw again properly. Okay. So let's turn on onion skinning here. So we have our sphere starting here. And let's actually just get rid of these drawings. We don't need those anymore. Now, what I can do is just animate the... Let's do this. I'm going to do 2 layers here. 2 folders. So let's delete that one and create a new animation folder and a new animation folder. So the first one is going to be our sphere. The next one is going to be our line, which is going to be right there. Let's keep it somewhat short. So what I can do is I'll just animate the sphere moving forward, going through, maybe speeding up a little bit, maybe kind of moving in a little bit of an arc. Missed a frame there. There we go. So moving in a little bit of an arc. You could have it moving in and out of camera depth, all sorts of things. So let's do something like this. Okay. You have a sphere going through your scene. Well, now you just have to take your line and imagine this sphere is pushing the line. So this is where I'm not going to be very good because I'm not good at drawing consistent lines. The sphere starts to push the curve up. Imagine it's a piece of cloth being pushed here. Gets pushed up, and then it wants to come back to where it was before. So it goes through here and gets pulled through. Let's add that line right there. Something like that. You just keep going. And then depending, this is where you'd also have to know what material your object is made out of. But and then it just kind of drops right there. So we get this sphere rolling through and pushing the cloth. This is Clip Studio Paint. And now all I have to do is turn off the sphere. Let's turn off onion skinning here. And we get that. This billowing motion. Now, my cloth is a little too pushed right there, but there you go. And if you take different sized spheres, so maybe the first sphere is small, but the second one is larger, suddenly you get a billowing effect that feels random because it's changing size. And if you think about it, that's really what wind is. It's a gust of wind, a pocket of air that's hitting a cloth and pushing it. The sphere is the gust of air. Think of Avatar: The Last Airbender. You just imagine Aang kind of sitting on this, on this little air speeder right there. It's a gust of air pushing through the cloth. That's what we're imagining. You do this with hair. You do this with anything, and you get that really nice effect. So going back to the program here, if we look at that cloth, imagine that sphere right here. Imagine there's a sphere right there. As it's going through, it's just pushing through and then leaving. Like there, we're just getting a little bit of the edge of the sphere it goes away. And then comes through. There's the sphere pushing through and continuing to push through. There you go. You get this nice overlapping action. And when you start getting, like, if you're actually good at drawing consistent lines, you can make this look absolutely gorgeous very quickly and easily. You're not just trying to think, okay, what shape should I, what random form? You're using this kind of basis. Now let's see. Since today's animation analysis, would you mind giving a look at the last exercise I've made? Simple head turn. Sure. I'm just going to finish analyzing this, and then we can do a quick look at your shot before I have to actually prep for a meeting. We get this billowing. Once again, imagine a sphere. Imagine there's a large sphere underneath her cloak here, and it's pushing through. That's really what it's doing there, and you can kind of see it like push through, and then poof, it goes away. So that's what creates that billowing effect. Now here, what I really wanted to look at is just how they managed to make the cloak go into a cube. They're just coming up, they flatten out the top first, keep this nice round shape, this bell shape almost, and then in one frame, just cube. And what I really love is that twist. This is what makes it feel so good. Is that they could easily just have this go poop, cube, and then just stay there. So on the next frame, it just kind of settles into cube form right here. Done. So it just kind of bloop, cube. No, they go further. Instead, to really show the cubeness of this, they have the whole thing spin. So you can see her arm is on this side of the cube, right here. But then, as it goes through, watch what happens. Her arm twists to the side, which is not natural, but the whole thing is not natural here. And the cube is turning. The side of her arm is over here. And then, whoop, we get that. So her arm is actually over there right now. And then it gets sucked into the form. You can just see a little bit of it right there. But that twisting motion is what gives that 3D shape to this. It lets the audience, the player, kind of see, like, see, we've got a cube, before turning it into a cube. So it doesn't just look like a square, which it is here. It's just a square until she starts walking. But they display it first. Now, the other thing I really like is this little pop here. The whole thing is kind of growing out. Then it kind of sinks in for one frame here. And then you get this sudden implosion. And then explosion. It's very fast. And then you have a little overshoot right here. Right there. And then it comes back in here. That is really nice. What's worse is she's not even an owl. Because her legs don't spin. Her legs still face the same way. It's just her torso that's spinning. So her hips and her head stay the same as the body twists underneath. Now, the way they do it to make it feel so that she's not breaking her body is just the arm coming back. So she's still technically facing forward, but it's her arm twisting around like this and then coming back in. And then when she changes back, let's see, do I have that? Now here we get this nice weight, this really slow build up, and then crunch down. Fast pacing, just like the bird. It's just that slow, fast, slow, fast. Do I not have her changing back? Oh, dang it. I thought I did. Yeah, it gives that tridimensionality feeling, which is very important. Technically, I should say this. It's not very important in the sense that she could just turn into a cube. That could be easy. But the problem is, if she just turns into a cube, that doesn't really show the weight of it, because, or it would be tricky to show the weight, because all it would look like is that her shirt, there's just a stick, like she's holding two sticks, or just she's got her arms up like that. So let's actually draw that here. So remove that here. So it would be like if she's got her body underneath here, she's just got her arms kind of in the corners, and then the cloth is just draping down from there, and she's just holding it tight. But when you see the cube, suddenly, how would she hold the cube shape? She doesn't have 4 arms to go into the 4 corners. That makes it feel like, oh, there's definitely been a transformation here. It's not just a shape, it's a volume, and the volume has much more weight.